Hello and welcome back to the Just As We Are podcast. I am your host, Katrina Lely, and oh my goodness, you guys, today's episode is so incredibly powerful. Malorie Avaline just gets incredibly vulnerable and open with you guys. She shares her story of living in an abusive marriage, where that was at, and how she found the strength to come out of that marriage. We had such a beautiful conversation around that and just kind of where she was at. And, she had 2 kids in the midst of that. And she talks about finding the strength to come away from that. And especially, sharing a little bit about her parents' marriage and kind of growing up in a similar situation. And so, not allowing what she knew as a child to continue and to carry on into her life as an adult. And through that, experiencing her own addiction and where she found the strength to come out of that addiction. We also talked about, she's a successful woman. She is a hairstylist, a beauty stylist, very successful, has done all the things. And we talk about, we can do all the things and be so successful and, be checking the things off our list. But underneath, when there is still that suffering or these hidden secrets going on, and how we carry forward, and recognizing that her addiction just changed from drugs to this success and checking the things off the list and, doing all of the things to an extreme. It was such a beautiful conversation. We really talked about the hard things, and she opens up and is very vulnerable about her story and where she's been and where she's come from. She's a serial entrepreneur. She's a speaker. She has her own podcast. She's a writer and a life coach. Mama to 3 children, married to her best friend now. She is unapologetically living her best life and creating every bit of it on her terms. She is really starting to just teach other women to shed their old beliefs about themselves and encouraging them to show up in the world in a bold and authentic way. She puts on live events, group events, one-on-one coaching. She shows other women the importance of stepping into their power with her Get in Your Truth message. She is all about helping you claim what you really want in this life and going out there and getting it. We met back at Mommy Millionaire Live event in October, and she was my roommate. It's so fun when you choose into curiosity, and Malorie talks a lot about getting curious. And, getting curious led to that event and led to our meeting, and really just a beautiful connection that I knew I needed to have her on this show for you guys to hear from her story, just how going in one direction and then finding herself in another direction. And it's been so fun to watch her just even these last few months, putting on her live events, what she's calling out in 2020. She is one of the most bold, confident women I have ever met in my life. And she has such a big, huge heart of gold. I am incredibly excited. Do not miss this episode. Welcome to the Just As We Are podcast. I'm Katrina Lely, a wife, mom in recovery, certified life and transformation strategist, community cultivator, lover of people, and student of life. Each week, I'll bring you love, inspiration, share the harder things people are afraid to talk about, and guests who are willing to shine their light for you. I give you self-care practices and mindset tips to help you shatter the negative stories you tell yourself. Now is the time to step into the beautiful, loved, whole woman you already are. Let's walk this journey together. Hello, welcome back to the Just As We Are podcast. I am here with Malorie, and Malorie, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with my audience. You and I just connected right away at the Mommy Millionaire Live event back in October. And the conversation that we got to sit down and have, you opened up and were so vulnerable right off the bat. Like, I knew you were my kind of person. We don't do the small talk. It's like, let's hear about your issues. Let's talk about the stuff that you've been through and how you've come through that. And I'm just so grateful that you are on and here to share your story, because it is so incredibly powerful.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And it's just like you said. I mean, I don't do the small talk. Sometimes I think I can scare people off. I don't intend to, but I think sometimes when people aren't ready for that kind of vulnerability, they're like, whoa, this chick goes deep like fast.
Yes. Yeah. And it's definitely not for everybody. Some people it takes that you got to build up some trust and things like that before they'll open up to you. And I too have thought that, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have went into my daddy issues yet. We should have waited until the second or third date.
That's so funny. But I mean, it really eliminates the surface friendships, especially when you're at the point that we are in our lives and really wanting to do big work in the world and actively building deeper relationships and more meaningful relationships. I mean, it really just kind of eliminates the small talk, and it really invites the people in that are more like you and that really want to do the big, deep work with you.
Right. Yes. And I know that people have had traumatic events happen in their life and they've been burned by other relationships. And so they tend to hold back, and, they're worried about that, some of that stuff happening again. And I totally understand that. I've been that person and I've been there, but there is something that is just so freeing when we're able to speak our truth or really get to the heart of things and share that. And it breaks down any walls and barriers. And it doesn't have to be a long process. It doesn't have to be a big honeymoon phase. Like, you don't have to be in relationship with somebody for a year or 6 months. I think people like you and I give people who are hesitant that permission when we're willing to show up as bold as we are.
Yes, I could not agree more. That was one of the things that I really spoke about at my conference that I hosted in November. When you are shining your light for everyone to see and you're doing it so authentically, you give others permission to see and be seen. And so when you're living in that bold authenticity, and as like I like to refer to it in my messaging, unapologetic authenticity, people see that and they're inspired by it. And so they are more likely to step into that themselves. And then they see it and they don't judge it as much the more often they see it. And so it allows them to see it in other people without judgment present, but it also gives them an opportunity to step into it in their lives. And so that's why I think it's so necessary that we all continue to walk in that authenticity.
Yeah, I love that so much. So tell us, for those of who don't know, I know about you, but tell us where you're from. You're married, you have kids, all of that stuff, and then just share a little bit of your story with us.
Yes, yes. So, like Katrina said, we met just not that long ago. Gosh, last October, and we both landed like within, I don't know, an hour of each other, total strangers at a hotel, and just sit down for lunch together. And these are the kind of conversations that we just started in immediately, which I love. My story. So I live in Oklahoma City. I've lived here pretty much my whole life. I, trotted off to Dallas for a little bit, but I came back. And I just have a very interesting story, which I think a lot of people do these days. I think there's a lot of blended families out there, and that's my story. And so I have three children, three humans that call me mama. One of them I adopted. Two of them are my, born from my body, but none of my three children have the same two biological parents. And my youngest is an IVF miracle. And so we've really had an interesting journey of family and of parenthood. I was married really early in life and also got divorced pretty quickly. And it was a very abusive marriage. It was a time in my life where there was a lot of drugs, a lot of alcohol, a lot of lying, a lot of infidelity, and a lot of brokenness, and so that was a period of my life. And when I finally, I don't know, I guess you can think of it like a baby animal. You see a baby animal being born and they're walking, but they're wobbly. And so in my wobbly, wobbly way, I walked away from that marriage and started over. And I fell who knows how many times and, made a lot of mistakes. But it was in that process and during that time that I got with my now husband, who I'm married to now, and we've been together about 12 years, married 8 of that. And we've built this beautiful, amazing life. And so, I mean, we could really expand on anything. I'm a pretty open book because I believe that vulnerability is the catalyst to helping people initiate change in their lives. And so that's why I felt so called to start sharing my story. And I've had such a successful career in the hair and makeup industry. A lot of people know me best for my work as a hair and makeup artist. And I've done everything. I've worked with magazines, I've worked with celebrities, I've styled New York Fashion Week. I've kind of checked all the boxes. And although I still love it and it's still something that I've enjoyed doing for so long, I felt called to more. I felt it was time to quit hiding and really just start sharing. And so it was probably 3 years ago that I really started sharing publicly my story. And I'm not going to lie, it wasn't easy. It rocked the boat. There was a lot of anger from my ex-husband. There was a lot of accusations, but I just had to continue to stand in my truth. And because I've done that and I've been consistent in that, I mean, it's just started a movement. And now I coach women. I do one-on-one coaching. I do group coaching. I've hosted a dozen women's events. I'm hosting my first retreat this year. And so there's just a lot of really exciting things that have happened. And man, I feel like there's going to be like a big, massive book one day because there's just too much to, put in one podcast or in a million podcasts. Gosh, but I stand boldly in my authenticity these days in hopes of helping other women do the same.
I love that. Was there a point in your life where, had you always known or been familiar with the personal growth side of things, or did that come along in your journey, with your addiction and things like that? Or have you always known growing up, like you were made for something more?
That's a really interesting question because, I grew up with my mother. Anytime anyone hears me speak about my mom, it's just with such heart. I just love her so much. And she is one of my biggest spiritual teachers. And so she always taught me to be a seeker. I mean, I don't remember a morning that she wasn't journaling and wasn't in her Bible and wasn't reading some kind of book. And then there was my dad, who was really huge into sales, who was like, big Zig Ziglar fan and, some of the old school and, Tony Robbins. And so I knew about that stuff, but I had never really dove into it. And it really wasn't until I would say around my rock bottom time that I was like, there's got to be something more. And for me, that rock bottom was, leaving an abusive marriage, literally packing up everything I could in my car one day while he was at work because I was fearful of what he would do if he saw me leaving. And moving in with one of my cousins, who is one of my dear friends. She and I are very close, and starting over as a single mom with 2 boys and being on food stamps and looking at my life, at 25 when I got a divorce. I'm 37 now, but 25 is when I divorced my ex-husband. And just that rock bottom that there's got to be something better. There's got to be something more. And so it started with books and it started with friends that loved me recommending books for me and just being curious, that curiosity of there's got to be something more. There's got to be something more to experience. There's got to be more information out there. what can I do? And so it was the curiosity of knowing there has to be something more that started to lead me in that direction.
Where did you find your strength to leave your ex-husband? Like, where did that come from? Because we hear, and you've been in it, that women stay in because of their fear of
Yeah.
what could happen. So where did you draw your strength from?
Gosh, God, absolutely. God and my mom. I mean, even though my mom, there's some things going on even with her and my dad, and they're splitting up right now. And after, 46 years almost of a very controlling, very manipulative marriage. And so it's really interesting because, I kind of joke around sometimes that I married my father, and that always trips people up. But I'm like, no, literally, my first husband was exactly like my father. And I have a decent relationship with my dad now. But as far as how he is as a marriage partner, it was just like my ex husband, except my father was never physically abusive to my mother, and my ex husband was. And so, even though she stayed in an unhappy marriage the majority of her life, she was strength during that, and she really helped me through a lot of that. And just the truth, I just had to stand on God's promises even when I felt like God was distant. And it's not like I was, because I'm not a religious person at all, which is kind of confuses people. I'm not tied to any kind of religion. I don't claim any kind of specific religion. In fact, I'm quite the opposite. I study several religions because I see God as a through line through all of them. And for me, it was just standing on truth, and if I was created in his image, then how do I not have the strength to move forward? And even if it's messy, and even if I'm going to make a mistake, I just have to keep putting one foot in front of the other.
That's so powerful. That is so powerful. And I really love that. And I was just thinking about, how you grew up, and you said, I married my dad. I think many of us end up doing that,
Mm-hmm.
especially if we have a father that is not present in the way that we would like them to be,
Yeah.
or in our own image. Like, we end up marrying our fathers, and, you know, you don't realize it until you're in it. But if you're of any person that, grows and wants to do more, you start to look at that and you start to see it. And it's like, oh my goodness, so being that happened for you and watching your parents' marriage, it's even more amazing that you found that strength instead of staying in the pattern in which you grew up in.
Yeah.
And watching your mom and dad stay together, it's been 40 some odd years, and you still have the strength to break that chain in your history.
Yeah. I think everything happens for a reason, as cliche and overused as that term is. Everything happens for a reason. I couldn't be the coach I am to women that are facing these things, and women that are stuck in these abusive, manipulative relationships, if I hadn't experienced what that like was, or what that was like firsthand. I wouldn't be able to talk to women about the struggles of addiction if I wasn't addicted to drugs myself and had to pull myself out of that. And so, as cliche as that is, I truly believe that everything happens for a reason. And my marriage to that man was not quite, we were together almost 7 years altogether with, dating and being engaged and married. The marriage was just shy of 5 years. And it escalated quickly. I mean, the day after we got married, we got in a huge fight and he threw his ring at me. And it was almost immediate that I was started to being treated like I was his property. And it just escalated from there. I mean, year after year, it just got worse. At first, it was a wrist grab. And then it was let me grab your shoulder and throw you against the wall. And then it was, well, I'll pin you against the wall and show you, how much power I have over you. And it escalated year after year. And I always had and I haven't thought about this in years, but I always had this underlining, like, knowing that if this gets real bad, I'm leaving. Like, I'm not going to tolerate this, because I would say I'm never going to be that woman that stays in a relationship just because she committed to it. I knew that was not going to be me, but the way I coped was drugs. And so when you're coping with drugs or alcohol, or I mean, anything, we know food can be an addiction. We know shopping can be an addiction. There's so many things that can be an addiction, but I got in a place where I was coping, and that's when I lost myself.
Mm.
And I literally looked in the mirror one day and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm that girl that I said I was never going to be. That woman that I would look at and say, how did she let herself become that? And it was in that moment that I decided to get sober. And it was 3 months later when I got pregnant with my son, my firstborn. And I left my ex-husband just after his first birthday, because it was like that sobriety and being able to think clearly. And I was no longer masking with any kind of substance, anything that was making me feel better. And by the grace of God, I was sober 3 months when I got pregnant with my son. And it was through that pregnancy that, you have a human growing inside of you, and you can't help but think. And I did a ton of reading when I was pregnant. And I just would sit and think, like, this one's going to love me for me. Like, this is going to be an unconditional love. There's no, I love you if, or I love you when. It's, this child needs me, and he needs a whole person. And it was truly, and both of my births of my two children that, that I carried myself, were very, very significant in my life and really changed something huge in me. And it was him that really pulled me out of that marriage, because I thought, my children deserve a happy mother, a loving mother, and I can't be the mother that they deserve if I'm miserable being married to this man every day.
Mm. That is so powerful and so beautiful, because oftentimes people will use their kids as the reason why they should stay in a relationship, or
Yep.
why they need to not pursue their own dreams, or why, they're the reason why not, rather than the reason why they should walk away from that relationship, or why they should go after their dreams. So I love that you shared that. It's so beautiful and powerful. And in all this, you also adopted his first son, correct?
Yes. So it's really it's an interesting story. So he had a son when we started dating. He was 18 months old, and I just fell in love with him. I mean, I was the girl that was like working part-time at the church as a teenager, in the nursery, watching the kids. And I taught dance as a teenager, and I taught little 4 and 5 year olds. So I just always loved children. I just love little ones, and I love their light, and I just love them. I just love kids. And so with him, when we started dating, I mean, there was an immediate attachment, and his biological mother was barely in his life at all. And she actually, no longer was in his life after about 3 years old. And it was around that point that we started the adoption process. Well, it was a really interesting thing. And I know, laws are probably different in every state, but here in Oklahoma, where we're at, the the biological parent, if they have no contact with a child 12 out of 14 consecutive months, the judge can actually rule that they have no parental rights. And so we had to prove that first. She was, and she's still, to this day, we still keep tabs on her, because she's just a very detrimental person. And she just did not need to be a part of his life, and we wanted to start the adoption process. Well, there was a process that happened first, and so it took a couple years for everything to be proven, and for the different court dates that had to happen. And we were right in the middle of the final stages of adoption when we actually ended up getting a divorce. And so the adoption itself never went through, but I always refer to him as and he does the same thing. He's 19 now, and he always tells people, oh, she adopted me. even though that legal paperwork never was filed and never was completed. So I was calling my bonus child, I'm like, my other ones I chose to have, and I feel like he chose me. And so we've got just a very special relationship, and it's just a really interesting dynamic. I mean, our family and our children, and it's beautiful, and I couldn't imagine it any other way.
Oh, I love that. You bring tears to my eyes because that is just so incredibly powerful and just so beautiful for you to stand up and continue to be in his life. I mean, he could have easily been left with your husband when you left him. And instead, you choose to
Yeah.
come in and still be this person in his life, knowing that that's what he needed. And his life, I know, is forever changed because of you.
Yeah.
And it takes incredible amount of strength to be that person for him. And so I just
Yeah.
give you so much love for that and kudos for that because that is so incredible.
Thank you. And I want to say too, and this isn't something I share very often, but I know that, your mission is entirely different. It's a lot deeper, and you talk about the harder things. And so for every woman listening that is facing, or man, if you're facing something like this, like, it was not easy. There was a few years in there that were really, really, really hard. And, the divorce shook him. I think he thought I was never really going to leave. But there was a period of time. So yes, when we got a divorce, even though the paperwork never went through with my oldest, we still kept him on the same schedule as my biological son. So when he was at my house, brother was at our house. Like, we just, they were a pair, they were always just there together. Well, there was a period of time when he was about 11, right before his 11th birthday, that I actually took my ex-husband to court for sole custody of my son because a lot of just really unhealthy things that were going on in the home and around my son. And I decided to take him to court. Well, I have no legal guardianship over my oldest because the adoption never went through. And so he used him as a manipulation tool during that time to get back at me for seeking sole custody of my firstborn son. And there was a period of about 2.5 years that he did not let him see me.
Mm.
And when it first started happening, now you got to, fast forward. I'm remarried. We have a wonderful life, very stable, very happy, just like a very happy home life. And this was how he chose to come back at me. And I would spend nights just crying in my husband's arms, not understanding, like, why does someone use your children as a pawn, and I know that there are people listening to this that are either currently facing that, or you have faced it, or someone facing it. And so I just want to say, you have to stand in your faith, and you have to stand in truth. It is, if someone is using a child as a pawn in your life, it is not a reflection of you. It is not a reflection of the type of person that you are. That is a reflection of their own pain, and they have not healed themselves. So they are using anything they can to hit you where it's going to hurt the most. And so that was a period of a couple years that was probably my hardest years. And things are different now. I have a good relationship with his dad, and his dad is remarried. And you got to think, he's 19 now, but he came back into my life at 13. And that was his choice. He told his dad, like, that's my mom. That's always been my mom. And you're not going to keep her from me anymore. And he started coming back around on his own. And so that's it. Like I said, and it makes me emotional thinking about all that, but it's not something I typically just offer up and share. But like I said, I know that, your message is about talking about the hard things, and it is about really sharing truth. And so I just want to tell people that are listening, that may be facing something that right now.
I'm so glad that you did share that because it's such a vital message for people to hear. I've been that pawn in that game, and it is not a place that I wish upon anybody. And it can have detrimental effects on somebody, and you just don't know what will happen. And I was thinking, he comes back at 13. That's a vital age to come back and have that woman in his life, that mom in his life. And so how incredibly beautiful that he recognized that at the age of 13 and stood up for himself. And he is already, a powerful man himself. And I love that you shared that.
Yeah.
So I want to shift a little bit. You talked about, having all of your success, being a stylist and, being in New York and doing all of these things, but still kind of hiding behind a mask a little bit and still in this place of, this isn't what I want to do, and going through hard things.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit more about what is that like, because those on the outside don't see that, somebody who may look like they have it all together and they have everything going well for them. They're successful in all these areas. And yet there's something going on behind. And too often, those on the outside don't know that or don't see that. And you're just as human as anybody else.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think we all have our coping mechanisms, right? We all have things we cope with. And this is something I've had to discover about myself and do a lot of healing around. I basically exchanged one addiction for another. Okay. Like, let's just call it what it is. I might have stopped doing drugs, 15 years ago, but it went into overdrive in success, in achievements, in fitness competitions. Fitness became an addiction for me. I did fitness competitions for 7 years, and it was always about how low can I get my body fat? Like, how heavy of weights can I lift? How small of jeans can I put on? And then with success, it was that way. It was like, okay, well, I did that. Now what's the next thing? Okay, what's the biggest contract I can land? Okay, awesome. I did that magazine. Like, what about this next one? And so it was my way of coping, because this just like need to jump into a new life, because I was so defined. I felt so defined at that time as his wife, and a pawn in the just manipulation of what our relationship was. And I no longer wanted any of that to define me. So I'm an extremist. Like, hi, my name is Malorie. I'm an extremist. I mean, it's just who I am. When I go in on something, I go all in. And so with my career, my thinking was, okay, I'm not going to let any of that define me. Like the drugs, the nightclub life, the any of it, like all of that. So I'm just going to pretend like nothing ever happened. It was a very, very fake it till you make it. So it was like this survival mode, right? Like I just had to cope. And so I just went full force into everything that I was doing. All the while, I was still very much struggling with, I would say I did not start building a copacetic relationship or anything that was just mutually beneficial for us until probably 3 years after our divorce. For a few years, there was nothing but animosity. There was a lot of threat. There was a lot of all of this. And so my way of coping with everything that was going on behind the scenes was to overachieve in my daily life in the public eye. And so it was very much these two worlds that I felt like I lived in, because I would come home and I would be fighting with him, even though it was over the phone. He was no longer my husband. I was dating somebody else at the time who's now my husband. Actually only dated one other person ever after my divorce, and now we're married. But it was the way I coped, and it was like this overachieve all day long in my outward life, and this just need to support myself, to make money, to build this career that I loved. And it was really in the middle of that, I would say somewhere halfway in between, because I've been a professional hair and makeup artist for almost 14 years. And it was somewhere in between. It was probably that halfway point that I started mentoring young women, because I had done the work. I had read a lot of books. I had hired my first coach. I had done these things that kind of got my feet wet in it. And I think that that's natural. You know, when you're changed as a person, you can't help but share what's changed inside of you. And when something relates in a conversation or somebody brings something up, you can't help but bring this new perspective. And so it really started there with mentorship, with just younger stylists and people who wanted to know how I achieved what I achieved. And I think it was for the first time in a conversation with a girl, gosh, probably like 8 years ago. And I had never said out loud, because like my drug of choice, it was not that one is better than another or one is more publicly acceptable than another, but my drug of choice was meth.
Mm.
And people look at me and they're like, what? You, Malorie, like you don't ever look like the type. And I'm like, listen, guys, there's not a type. Like drugs don't discriminate, you know? And it was in a conversation in mentorship that this young stylist, she was probably 21 at the time, and was really opening up to me about struggles. And I was like, listen, girl, I get it. I was a meth addict for 6 years. And she was like, jaw dropped to the floor, like did not know what to say, because people, it's really easy for people to look at someone, like you said, that's successful and just think that their life unfolded in a particular way and that it was just all perfect, and oh, they must have had a great support around them and wonderful parents and great friends. And it's like, no. And so it was in those moments that I would use as teaching moments, you know, and that just, it grew and grew and grew. And that's, I don't know. I don't even remember what the question was that you asked, but it just kind of has come full circle. And I got to a point where I didn't want to hide behind it anymore.
I love when people are willing to open up and talk about their addictions, because it's true. You can be addicted to anything. When I look back now, my first addiction was TV. As a child, growing up in an alcoholic home, that was my best friend. That was my first addiction, getting out of that. And that's carried with me through all of my other addictions, you know, and I think about it easily now. Had I been brave enough, and I don't think brave is the right word, but had I been brave enough to try something like meth, I know like it would have been, to me, it doesn't really matter. It's in me, and that's what I do. That's how I cope. And, alcohol was my choice. But I think it's just so important, that I love that people are willing to open up and talk about it, because we bring the hope to those families and people who are suffering,
Yeah.
who think that there is no hope, that there is no other way out, when there really is.
Yeah, there absolutely is. I mean, I'm fascinated because now I completely nerd out and go really deep on the human brain. And I'm just fascinated by all the studies that I read and the different doctors that I listen to. And our brains are so powerful. And I mean, people ask me all the time, like, how did you come out of that addiction? And I'm like, I decided. I mean, it's as simple as that. Like, I decided that whatever it took, I was no longer going to surround myself with the people that had it. I was no longer going to put myself in a position where it could possibly be. I was going to say no to everything that didn't align with me going in this new direction. And so I just think the brain is incredibly powerful. And I think that there is so much hope out there for people that are looking, and you just have to find the support of what's going to work for you.
Yeah. And it truly is that, it's that decision. And we forget in the midst of it all that we have a choice. Our
Yeah.
choices are taken away for a while, and we forget that we have a choice. And it truly is that decision. There is nobody who can say or do the right thing. There's no thing that can change in your life that will create that. It all has to come from within. And then, of course, giving it up to God after that, and, doing something different and doing whatever it takes. You now are coaching women. You're putting on your own events. Talk a little bit more about your mission with all of that, because I am so inspired by you and what you're doing and creating. Like, I cannot wait to collaborate in some way in the future around all of that.
Yes, me too. I am all about some collaboration. That is one of the things I stand firmly on, because I just am of the belief that we are so much better together than we could ever be alone. And Like, we're not meant to do life alone, ladies. We're not meant to. We're supposed to connect. We're supposed to collaborate. And so it was just over 2 years ago that I hosted my first women's dinner. And I had 50 women in an intimate setting and candles on the tables and a great meal. And I spoke and shared my story and had a couple other women share and speak their stories. And it was so powerful what happened that evening. And then all the women ended up standing around the parking lot for over an hour because they're cracked open and they're like, oh my gosh, I want more of this. Are you going to do another one of these? And when I first started it and did that first dinner, I had no intentions of anything really. I just wanted to host a dinner and host women. And after that, that's when I recognized, like, wow, there's a need for this. Women are looking, women are seeking, and the messages started to pour in. I mean, there was women that were saying things like, I left work early, I was in jeans, I had a dress in the car, I had a doctor's appointment after, and I was just so rushed. I didn't get to put the dress on, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to fit in this room. And then they would say, but the authenticity in that room within the first 10 minutes, I no longer cared what I was wearing. Or a woman that said, I literally sat in the car for 15 minutes because I invited 5 friends and all of them told me they were not going to something like that, that sounds ridiculous. So I came alone and I was so afraid. And so it was those stories, because those women that were so scared to come in and that were so scared that they were going to be judged sat and listened to woman after woman that were facing the same fears, the same insecurities. And so I started to realize there's something here. There needs to be more of this. And so that's when I formed the Avaline Collective, which is my business. And I just believe in this collective effort of raising women up. And it goes far beyond the buzzword empowerment for me, because is it great to feel empowered? Of course. Do we love to feel inspired and motivated? Of course we do. But it has to start with knowledge. Like, sharing information and gathering knowledge that you can actually apply to your life, that's what's going to change you. The discipline and the action that you're taking to support your goals goes far beyond being inspired. And so I do this through all kinds of ways. I collaborate with other business owners. I work with a lot of other speakers, teachers, and coaches now. I still have coaches that coach me on how to be a better coach. I mean, this just blossomed. And so now I did my first 2-day women's conference last November, and it was a massive success. I mean, it was far bigger and better than anything I ever could have even dreamed of. We had 125 women there that were changed. I mean, forever changed. And I'm seeing the domino effect of that now, because I'm seeing these women go start to build their dreams. And I have a coaching program that I'm getting ready to release, where I'm actually doing something small and intimate for the first time. I grew up on a stage. I grew up a competitive dancer and in musical theater. So I'm like, give me the stage and a microphone and I'm going to talk to you guys. But what I realize is that some women want more. You know, they want that deeper one-on-one connection. And so I have not launched it yet, but I'm getting ready to launch, and I'm only accepting 20 women. And it's going to be a 12-week program where they are one-on-one with me for a 12-week period, and do some group coaching as well. But then we're going to end it with a 3-day luxury private retreat. And
Oh,
really celebrate the progress, because I get it. Like, I've been through the trauma. There is nothing that anyone could come at me with that I would not be able to help them through at this point. And so the Avaline Collective is that. I mean, it's just this collective of women coming together to help one another in targeting those limiting beliefs, in overcoming the obstacles, in transforming those obstacles into opportunities, and really putting yourself in the mindset and in the belief that you can truly manifest the life of your dreams.
that gives me chills, and it's so exciting. I love that so much. And I was thinking, I want you to speak to the woman who feels as though, she's going about her life and, things are fine. She loves her job. There's nothing like really exciting that she can think of that she wants more of in life. Why would she want to step into a personal growth space?
Oh, because the good stuff happens when you're curious. It's like, because I have women that will ask me that. They're like, but I love my job. Or, not every woman is an entrepreneurial woman. It's not for everybody. So I have very, very close friends of mine that when they clock out at 5 p.m., or maybe they're a nurse and they work the night shift, but when they clock out, they're done. They don't want to think about their job when they go home. They want to be with their children, or they want to be with their husband, or maybe they're not married and don't have kids and they just like to be and they just want to travel. That's great. But I'm telling you, you never know what is going to come out of you in such a creative way or such a profound way if you're just curious. I don't think that you have to go into self development with any kind of specific intention to get something out of it. Now, some of us do. Some of us will pick a certain event because we know exactly what we're going to gain from going to that event, or we know exactly what we're looking for. So we ask for a specific book recommendation, and that's fine too. We all go through this personal development journey differently. But I mean, the beauty and curiosity, it's like it's like taking someone to a painting class that's never painted before, or taking somebody to the ocean that's never been to the ocean before. And it's just like when you're exposed to something new, it sets something in your soul on fire. And I just think that following that curiosity is a way to make beauty in your life unfold in ways that you never imagined or planned for it to.
I love that so much. And I'm glad that you shared that. I knew you were the person to ask that question as well, because I think there's little bit of a stigma out there that these types of events are for those who are not happy with their life or looking to get out of a job or things like that. And, for me, my mission is it's for everybody because
Yes.
we're completely whole in love just as we are. And that's for everybody. I want to create that curiosity and, the people just to be awakened a little bit more and
Yeah.
the connection in it and being real. There's so much beauty in just that and elevating your life. It's not necessarily somebody who's ready to quit their job and go do something or take a big leap. Oftentimes it's those small experiences, those intimate experiences that just elevate yourself in a way that you didn't know was there.
That's exactly what it is. And there was several women that attended my conference that said the same thing. And this one woman in particular, if you see me, like, if you guys look me up on Instagram or my website, like I am the epitome of like a girl, right? Like I love hair and makeup. I love froofy things. I did Katrina's hair and makeup or your makeup that day for the photo shoot just because I'm like, just let me play. So that's me to a T, but not all women are like that, and you're going to see a lot. Gosh, I totally forgot where I was even going with that. My like lost train of thought. Tell me your question again that you asked.
What was my question? Oh my goodness. I'm totally brain. I was just sharing how I love that you shared that because it's not necessarily just for the woman who is, wanting some big change. It's
Oh, yes. So we were the woman. Yes. So there was one woman in particular at my event, and that's what I was saying, like how girly I am. She comes walking up to me and she is like, I have to tell you, I almost didn't come to this. She's like, look at me and look at you. And she's like, I ride horses, I have a barn, I don't wear makeup. This is how I dress every day. She's in like very relaxed clothing, very neutral colors. I'm in like a baby pink suit with like a lace top underneath it and tassel earrings, and she's like, my friend invited me 6 or 7 times and I told her no every single time. She said, because I knew who you were. I knew that you owned a salon. I knew that you were like really into hair and makeup. And I thought, there is no way in hell I am stepping into a room full of women that look, walk, talk, and act like her. Like I will be so out of place. And she said, but look around in here. I mean, there were young women that were 16 and 17 that came with their moms or their sisters. And there were women that were in their 60s. There were African American women and white women and Indian women and Asian women. Like there were just women of every color, every shape, every size, every age, every ethnicity, every background, all with different missions and visions about their lives. And so it doesn't have to look the same. She came into it because she said a friend convinced her that she was going to get something out of it. And she said that she just walked away with an entire new perspective on female friendship alone, because she had this idea, this story in her head that friends should have things in common and that friends should, dress alike and like the same foods and like the same hobbies. But it showed her that we're all different and that we should celebrate our differences, and that it's not only is it okay to be different, but you should be proud to be different. How boring of a world would it be if we all had the same passions and we all looked alike? There would be no diversity. And so that's my whole point with that. It's going to look different for everybody. Self-development's going to look different for everybody. Growth is going to look different for everybody. So be curious and go experience something new.
Yes, so much yes to that. And I think about, I was first turned off to Kayla Craft because of the way she dressed. And until I got to know her more, I'm like, her and I have a lot in common. There's a lot of similarities in our stories. And she is one of my most favorite people. And it's like, I am learning still to embrace the girly side of me. I mean, when I had a daughter, I was terrified because I am like, I'm not a girly girl. I just want
What
boys.
do I do?
That's me. What do I do? And so I love that you shared that. And, you keep talking about the curiosity. Yes, just be curious. Be curious and be open, and you just never know what can happen when you're curious like that.
Yeah.
So I love that. What is the big thing you're calling out in 2020?
Oh, I'm going to say this because I would normally not say this. So this means I need to say it. But I am calling out massive abundance and opportunity.
Yes.
I was somebody who my entire life was told money's the root of all evil, credit cards are terrible, rich people are greedy, if you have more, others have less. Like that is the principle that I adopted. And although I have done so much work around this, I mean, my goodness, like you and I were doing that exercise face to face at Mommy Millionaire, and I start bawling as soon as I start talking about money, because it's just this lingering thing of and I've made good money, like I built a 6-figure business on my own with no help from anybody, just my tenacity alone. But I always thought if I wanted more than that, then I'm not happy enough. I must be greedy. There must be an underlying need, that some void that I'm trying to fill. But I've done so much work around that it's entirely different. So not sabotaging opportunities from, my fear of massive success, but leaning into it. And it's already been a wild ride, and it's like February, and I've already had so many opportunities come up, and just literally God placed them in my hands and say, okay, you've been asking for this. Here it is. And so I am calling forth massive abundance and massive opportunity, because here's the thing. The bigger my company grows and the more money I can earn, the more I can give, the more I can hire people to bring in, the more I can create abundance in other people's lives as well. And so that is my big, big call in for the year.
It's yours. I already know it. Like I'm sitting here and I can feel it. It is already yours. It's on its way to you.
Yes.
And that is so beautiful. My next question is, before we wrap up, what is it that you are working on right now that you know that if you could just get past this, your life would be changed just like that?
I think the first thing that's coming up that I have not even spoken about publicly is my parents going through a divorce right now. Like, it's not on social media at all. It's not anywhere right now. And it's hard because I have a lot of, people kind of joke around and loosely use the term daddy issues, but there's a lot there. And for now, I've had to set some boundaries with him to not allow him into my life. But I also know deep down inside of me that the healing that's going to take place over time is going to help a lot of people, because there's just so much there. There's so many deep-seated beliefs and issues and traumas. And because I've done the healing, I recognize his pain. I recognize the unhealed parts of him. But that doesn't mean that I have to allow him to drag me down to his misery. And so once I'm able to work through all of this and really gather the knowledge and the clarity, because my word for the year is clarity, around it that I need, I truly believe I'm going to be able to help other people face issues with their parents or their family members in particularly.
Thank you for sharing that. That was very vulnerable of you. And I appreciate that so much.
Yes.
I know that I can see it in you. And what I know from my own experiences, as I continue to heal and work on those mom and dad issues, like, beautiful things are going to come from that. And the awesome thing is you are so willing to do the work.
Yeah.
A lot of people are not. And there's so many great fruits that come from that work. So thank you so much.
Yes.
And thank you for coming on here and sharing yourself and being vulnerable and open. You and I have a special relationship, and I am truly grateful for you being in my life, and grateful for Kayla, who brought us together in that event where we were able to share such a beautiful time in our life.
Yes.
And I am excited for you and to continue to watch you grow and your business just expand, and all of the beautiful things that you call out are on their way for you.
Yes. Thank you so much. And I'm just so proud of you, because you were talking about your podcast in October, and here it is. You brought it into fruition. And now, because of what you're doing, that's going to create a domino effect for everyone that you touch in your life. And that's going to be a trickle effect to everyone that are touched by your story and by what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anything left on your heart that you just absolutely want to share?
I think it's just that's been coming up for me a lot lately, is that curiosity thing, because women will ask me often, well, what if I don't feel like I have a big purpose? Or what if I don't feel like I'm passionate about anything in particularly? I say lean into the curiosity. And a perfect example is, I literally bought the ticket to Mommy Millionaire Live to go see Kayla because I thought, this will be great. She's really good at business. She's really good at sales. I'll really be able to get some, practical knowledge on my business. And it was that, and it was very helpful, but it was so far from that. I have connected with so many amazing women that I am now plugged into all over the country. I've gotten to have them on my podcast. Some of us are collaborating together, doing affiliate stuff together. I mean, there's just so much that has been birthed from it, from leaning into that little soul nudge inside of me that thought, that'll be a good conference to go to. Like, that'll be a good idea. And so I say that, that's what I would want to leave you with, is lean into the curiosity. And if my retreat sounds like a fit for you after everything we've talked about, then by all means, listen in. I have a podcast. My Instagram's just at Malorie Avaline. And then my website is malorieavaline.com. And you can find out more info there. I love reaching out and loving on women. It's my thing.
Yes. Thank you again so much for being here and providing so much value to me and to the audience. I love you so much and cannot wait to watch you just bloom this year.
Thank you. So much love for you, girl.
Hi, friends. If you enjoyed this episode of the Just As We Are podcast, it would mean so much to me if you would head on over to iTunes and leave me a 5-star review. Take a screenshot of today's episode and tag me at Katrina Lelly on your social media. If you haven't already, head on over to the Just As We Are podcast community on Facebook and hit join, where you will get to join more of the Just As We Are tribe. And remember that no matter where you are on your journey, you are completely whole and loved just as you are.